So what's up, O'Brien Army? I assume you're wondering why Kamera has such a large workforce and how our military is so powerful. Well, let me share a little secret with you. The kids are allowed to work. And not only are they allowed to work, they're legally allowed to work when they're 7 years old, and they're allowed to live on their own when they're 8 years old. So you can have an 8-year-old. Your son can turn 8 years old in Kamera and automatically move out of mom and dad's house to go live on their own. And and 9 times out of 10 they're actually responsible enough to have a job, so that they can pay their bills and taxes instead of buying junk like candy. Okay, occasionally they do buy a little bit of candy, but most of their money goes towards bills and taxes and stuff like that, and maybe rent if they didn't buy the house. And that's because our workforce in Kamera actually takes in people from 7 years old to 55, 60. And not only that, but our military actually recruits people who are 7 years old and up. So, and that's kind of disturbing. I mean, that's just like, you can have like a 7-year-old girl carrying a big ass rifle or driving a giant tank, and she's used to seeing death. She's used to fighting, and she's used to seeing death. That's pretty disturbing. Although, that's what makes our military so powerful. However, any soldiers that are under the age of 12 or 13 are not allowed to go on missions outside the country. Okay? Any soldier under the age of 12, at the very least, will only be allowed to carry out missions inside of Kamera. And the soldiers from 12 up or 13 and up will be the ones to carry out missions outside of the country. So, but whether they're inside or outside of Kamera, they're still protected and they're still taken care of. And that is why our workforce and our military are so powerful. Not to mention the fact that we actually hire 8-year-olds as police officers and 7-year-olds for undercover officers. So you can actually own a gun at 6 years old in Kamera. Yeah, you can. As long as you can prove that you're responsible before you get it. Yeah. And you're considered an adult when you're 8 years old. As soon as you're old enough to join the military, you're considered an adult. So basically, we do have a workforce. However, no one below the age of 6 is allowed to own a gun. Just like nobody 6 or 7 years old or younger is allowed to work or join the military, of course. If they can't work, they can't be a soldier. And that's pretty disturbing too, because you could have like an 8-year-old girl driving a police car, and then all of a sudden she takes some random dude charges her with a knife in his hand, and she pulls out a taser and she takes that motherfucker down. It's pretty embarrassing for a grown-ass man to be taken down by an 8-year-old girl. So, but they do get a lot of training. They get a lot of practice. So they always know what to do in every situation. Just like the soldiers and the SWAT officers. I still think a person on a SWAT team is basically the halfway point between a cop and a soldier. Because, yeah, they wear all that. They've got the armored truck and they have all those big-ass guns and shit. Yeah, that's what makes me believe that a SWAT officer is the halfway point between a cop and a soldier. So, and you can legally be a cop at 8 years old in Kamera. You're allowed to work when you're 7, but you can't join the military or be a member of the emergency services until you're 8 years old. Until you're 8 years old. Or 12 years old enough if it's border patrol. I mean, how would you like it if you got pulled over one day and you realized that the cop that just wrote you a ticket was actually 8 years old, but still seemed to know what they were doing? Yeah. So we do hire children from 7 years old up. Yeah. So, but of course, the only time stores are allowed to have kids who are younger than 7 years old is working there is if they stole something, but the store owner's only allowed to have that kid working there until they've worked long enough to pay for whatever they stole. Then it's okay. But if he just wants to put them to work just for no reason, that's against the law. And on average, kids who are 7 years old and up, who actually apply for a job, they get paid a lot of money from the workforce. I mean, we also have kids doing CPS. I mean, imagine that. The social worker that just took your kids away from you was a kid themselves, or kids themselves. The social workers that just took your kids away from you were kids themselves. Come on, what's all this? You're legally allowed to work in Kamera from the age of 7 to the age of 55. And when you're 56, that's forced retirement right there. Actually, you can work until you're 60, but after that, there's really not much you can do once you turn 61. There's really not much work you can do once you turn 65. So, cause we need jobs for all the kids and stuff. So when you're too old to work, you're too old to work. Though we do provide unemployment for people who are 56 and older. We do provide unemployment checks and elderly checks and stuff like that for people who are above the age of 55. And occasionally we'll do stimulus checks for people who are too young to work, or for people who are unemployed. But yes, some of our politics are kids in Kamera. You can go to Derby Towers right now and some of the senators and stuff like that are actually kids. One of our we have a couple political scientists who are kids too. So that just goes to show you why our workforce is so powerful and why our military is so huge and so powerful. I mean, think of it. You've got an 8-year-old girl with a big ass gun, probably driving a full-size tank, and she's used to seeing death. That's pretty alarming. Pretty disturbing too. Although, like I said, they always get excessive amounts of training so that they're ready for every possible scenario that comes their way. Yeah. So there ain't nothing that can get by them. They may be kids, but they're still smart and they're still strong. Even kids have power in Kamera. And even prison guards can be children. Imagine that. Even a judge can be a kid. Imagine being sentenced to 10 years in prison by a judge who's only 8 years old. Man. All the better reason why you should follow the law, if you ask me. Although these kids are really responsible. They have to prove themselves responsible before they could get a job like that. So in order to do that, we usually start them off with jobs like toilet hawkers, plumbers, stuff like that, and then they work their way up to bigger jobs like military and stuff. Probably as of now, we probably have like a couple thousand kids in the military. As of now. Couple thousand kids, and that's just from 8 years old to 12 years old. I can't tell you how many teenagers we have in the military right now. Yeah, we've got quite a few teenagers. Probably at least 1 million teenagers, if not a little more. Teenagers can also be SWAT officers, you know that, right? And a 7-year-old can be a security guard. Imagine a 7-year-old girl holding a baton and a flashlight, wearing a security uniform. And then she takes down some grown-ass man with a taser and pepper spray. Yeah. And they are heavily trained as well. So you're legally allowed to start working once you turn 7 years old. It's just most kids prefer to start when they're 8 years old or older. And if they do decide to work at such a young age, we do have opportunities for them to still take their education through a special computer, through computers and stuff when they're either at home or off duty. We still give them education. Don't get me wrong, they still go to school. It's just when they're working, they don't have as much time for that. But they still do it. on average, we probably have a couple billion kids working in Kamera. Yeah, so that explains why our workforce is so big, and it explains how our military is so powerful. So there's nothing fishy going on. That's just it. Anyway, even a firefighter can be a kid. You have like a 12-year-old pulling you out of a burning building, and doctors can be kids too. Imagine having having an 8-year-old girl save your life when you're in the hospital. Yeah. Even a scientist can be a kid. Or you have kids building your house for you. Just imagine that. Or even exterminators. Imagine having a rattlesnake in your house and you call for an exterminator and a group of kids show up with the equipment they need to catch it. Yeah, just imagine that. And these kids have to be smart. And they have to remember to use common sense and be responsible at all times. So that's how kids get jobs in Kamera. And they do still get paid fairly. Just so you know, they don't work without pay. Like I said, unless they stole something or broke something. Then they have to work without pay until they've worked long enough to pay for it. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. So please like and subscribe, leave a comment, and click the bell notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.